My name's Corey Stockton, and I'm a lead game designer on World of Warcraft. I've been on WoW. I actually just hit 10 years this year, so it's been a long time.
Oh.
And I work on, many different aspects of the game, but generally focus on the world design, cities, battlegrounds. I designed the dungeons, all kinds of different things. I worked a lot on pet battles, the original guild leveling system, and then I was heavily involved with garrisons for warlords quite a bit.
So the first question is about patch 6.2. It just went out, and there is a lot of daily quests linked to reputations that you somehow need to have. And back in Mist of Pandaria, people were against daily quests. They were angry against daily quest. And what do you feel about this daily quest in 6.2? Because some people say it's only bashing for the reputation, and the reputations are very important in the patch. So what is the feeling about this?
Well, we've kind of gone through a few different phases. I would say in Pandaria, we went crazy on the daily quests. I think a lot of people would agree. We had a massive amount of dailies for literally almost everything, every single faction. And we felt that, getting done with the expansion and looking back. And so you saw us go into Warlords with way less dailies. We went with a little bit of a new style of trying to do the concept of our kind of bonus objective areas. So you can get sent to an area. You can do a vast number of different things in that area to earn the bar and fill up the bar for that, and kind of have that be a different vibe. In fact, we had very few dailies, if you look, in connection to Pandaria to what we had in Warlords. So looking to 6.2 specifically, we thought it was a good chance to bring back a few of the dailies that we had from before. We felt like we had probably taken away too much, because as a knee-jerk reaction from Pandaria and how much reaction there was to, oh man, not more dailies, we kind of took everything out. And so looking here, we thought it was a good opportunity to bring a few dailies back into the game. And it's a great spot to do it because Tanaan Jungle is a huge place, right? It's a giant zone. And we do have those battlefield objective areas where you go, and you can do different things to fill up the bar and stuff like that. But we thought a few directed dailies would be okay to bring back because there's so many things to do in the zone.
Okay. Thank you for the response. About Tanaan Jungle and phasing. Since Worlds of Draenor, there is a new system of phasing. When there are too many people, they are just different phases. But there are some problems with the rares. If some rare pops in Tanaan Jungle and you want to go to kill him, then you just go there and there's no rare because you're not in the right phase. You have to group yourself with a player that sees the rare. Do you plan to maybe enhance this or fix this?
Couple things. We have a couple plans for that. Number one, we do have a fix for the yells, the issue that you're seeing there. So what's happening is when the rares spawn, they do a yell to the zone. The thing is currently that yell is not limited to the shard that you're specifically on. It goes to all of them, right? But that rare only spawned on one of them. So then everyone, like you said, goes to the spot and then it's not there. So that's one core problem of that system that we have a fix for that we're going to try to roll out as soon as we can to deal with that issue. The second issue is when Tanaan launched, we very specifically set the layering kind of technology. Like you guys mentioned, we essentially run multiple versions of Tanaan Jungle to handle the large number of players that are there at one time so that it plays well with the number of players we think that the zone should have. We're only going to have a lot of those shards at the beginning, the first few weeks. As we trail off into the patch and get a little bit further, we will reduce the number of shards to what only is necessary, so that more of these issues that people are seeing will be reduced, because essentially we'll be reducing the total number of shards that would be there in that area. That doesn't mean we don't want to obviously fix all the issues that we would have, like the issue with the yell. That's an issue we're going to fix. But like you said, it's pretty new technology, so we're still going to be finding a few things as we go along. And we appreciate all the patience from our players of dealing, with some of these issues as we go. But I think in the long term, we really see it as a super important technology for World of Warcraft, that we can be able to build spaces that can accept, in theory, tens of thousands of players in one area and allow our servers to not overheat and explode.
Yes, because we noticed this is apparently this is automatic, because if you go in any zone of World of Warcraft, also Azeroth, if there are too many players on one place, they will just start automatically to do those layers. And
Yeah, we can choose which areas we want the layers to be in. So we can very specifically say we want it in a whole zone, we want it in a small area. There's lots of different places that we can choose to use the tech, but we generally try to limit it to the places where we feel like they would have the biggest population problems. And then the idea is that we continually monitor it. And as soon as the population isn't a problem, we drop the sharding right off so we don't have to deal with it.
So this is a more offset question, but will you continue to have the servers, or does a server mean today anything besides being PvP or PvE?
We are a little bit in the middle of a transition, aren't we, on that stuff? I think all of us, especially any of us that have played WoW for so long, we really tend to love our association with our server, right? I remember my very first Horde server that I played on. I remember everything about it. I remember Anixia's head getting placed in Orgrimmar and thinking that was the greatest moment ever, right? And that was on my server. Things like that. And we don't want to lose those specific types of moments. The technology that we're building in hopes that people can remain to have their server identities, but that when they want to do events with more players, we would be able to allow those kind of events to happen, but without having to make our players move from one server to the other. We don't want to force our players to have to do server merges or things like that. And that's what this technology really allows, is that you can stay on a server that might have been your server for a long time, but your auction house will still be very full. You'll still see lots of players in the areas you're going to, and your queues hopefully will still continue to be short. That's the ultimate goal, is to kind of keep that identity, but give people all the benefits of a very full server.
Okay, fine. My question is about Garrison. With patch 6.2, the new mission of the shipyard can be very long, and the Mage Tower has the power to make it instant, to end it instantly. Don't you feel it's a bit unbalanced compared to the other Garrison perks?
That is definitely a very strong benefit currently of the Mage Tower, but I think many players would also agree with us that the Mage Tower has probably felt underpowered for a very long time as far as a building in the Garrison. Not to say that the power it offers right now is exactly where we want it. It's something that we're going to be looking at. But kind of the ultimate goal of the answer to your question here would be, we're actually looking at the timers on the shipyard missions, and we're going to be reducing the duration of the non-raid missions, so they're not as long. I think a lot of people have gotten into shipyards and really been pretty excited about getting into the system, and then jumping in and they're faced with 2-day and 3-day missions right off the bat that aren't offering raid level rewards. And we've certainly seen that feedback. And so that's something we're going to be acting on, and we're going to be reducing the duration on those non-raid missions actually, we're hoping to be able to do it in a hot fix. We'll see if we can get that out. That's something that we're working on in the short term.
Okay, fine.
About the followers, there weren't any high-level upgrade on this patch. Do you plan to have a higher level for the future, or can we just throw away our weapons and armors?
Well, we had really seen the shipyard as that next evolution of what that follower and mission gameplay is, that we would see people move on to that. Obviously, that doesn't mean that we're just going to leave the current missions and followers behind, because that's one of the main ways that you get oil to continue to run your shipyard missions. So oil missions will continue to be necessary and something that we want players to do. But I think you can look at it in a similar way to where, we've heard so many questions about why aren't we raising the levels on pets? Why don't we take pet levels from 25 to 30 or 35? And I think it's a similar answer here, that we really see followers as content. So for people to get new followers, bring those followers in, have new abilities, new traits, we're not looking to change the core of the system. What we're looking to do is add more content to the system. We're really looking to go wide rather than vertical, right? So that we can give players lots of new things to look for. Because we feel like the system is pretty strong. We've gotten a lot of feedback on the system of what people are doing. We just want to give people more ways to interact with it.
Okay.
And about the Garrison, do you think it was a good idea in Warlords of Draenor? Did you enjoy it? Did you think the feedback of the community was very good? And are you going to think about a garrison-like system for the future?
It's a great question. Garrisons was a humongous feature for us, obviously, in Warlords, by far the biggest feature that we did. And anytime you take on a feature that big, it's going to be, you're going to run into roadblocks. Not everyone's going to like it. It's going to be tough. We're going to make lots of changes along the way. Overall, I think, yes, we're very happy with the feature. Are there things we would have done different? Absolutely. And that it's things that you've seen us change through the patch cycle already, through patches, through hot fixes. We're always looking for feedback and trying to balance things and change them. As far as what we would take forward, I think we're going to look at the parts of the system that work the best and the parts of the system that we would say, how can we advance the system and offer some new gameplay that's exciting? That's really what we want in WoW at this point, right? Is we want to engage players in new ways. You want to give them a new way to play the game. We're obviously always going to have new dungeons, and we're going to have new raids, and we're going to continue PvP. But I think over time, we still have to give players new things to do. So building a building felt very fresh. It felt different. Assigning a follower to that building, sending your followers on missions. Those are all new things, right? But in the end, players figure out ways that how does it affect the economy? So how am I going to very specifically get this many work orders and do this with my profession and do this thing? And that's just kind of where WoW, ends up. We have very passionate players. Players are going to figure out the backside of the system at a certain point, right? So for us, we want to continue to involve that stuff, but in ways that will engage the players in new ways, right? So I can't say we're going to take every part of Garrisons forward, but I think you can definitely count on the fact that we're going to take the things that we think offer the opportunity for new stuff and the things that players really liked, and we'll move forward with those things.
Okay. Coming back to patch 6.2 and Hellfire Citadel, apparently it is the last raid of the expansion. You will be confirming us or not at this point. How do you plan to bring content before the next expansion? Will there be a patch 6.3? And how will you do to not have a long gap as before, because player didn't feel really happy to wait more than 1 year to have new content in the game?
Yeah, we're not happy with having players have to wait a year for new content either. It definitely is not something we want to do, but we've found ourselves in those situations where we're working on the new expansion, and as Blizzard does, we're not going to release it until we feel like it's at the quality level where it's going to be right. Does that mean it's right to have a year gap? No, that's not an excuse for that, but it's definitely a situation that we've been in where we feel like, we've just got to make sure that it's right. We've got to make sure it's good. It's better for the expansion to take a little bit longer and have it be great than it is for it to come out 2 months earlier and have it have tons of issues that we then have to deal with down the line. So that's something we're actively trying to avoid. We're definitely working as hard as we can to make sure that gap is smaller. In regards to future content patches, as we've already announced, we're going to be doing a 6.2x patch that's going to introduce flying to Draenor. I'm sure you guys know about the Pathfinder achievement.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's going to offer flying for people, which I'm sure we'll talk about in more detail here. That's our next announced specific patch that we're going to be doing. And that's going to introduce flying and a bunch of fixes to make sure that flying works correctly in Draenor for everyone. Outside of that, I don't have any specific info I can give you on, future patches of what we would do between now and whatever our next thing is. Part of that's just going to come down to how does patch 6.2 play out on the servers. As you guys probably know, we watch everything very closely. We'll be checking how far players along on their progress, how are they doing on the raid, how are players doing on the reputations in the zone, and we'll start to get a feel for how long that content's going to last. And like we generally do, we're pretty reactive to that stuff, and we'll just, like I said, we're trying everything we can to make the gap be smaller.
So is Hellfire Citadel the last raid of the expansion, or we don't know?
It's currently planned. It's currently planned, and I think that's the way we look at it. It's kind of like the wrap up. It's hard to beat someone like Archimonde for a boss, as players know. I think he's a pretty amazing guy to be able to fight. And I think it's clear to people who have played the storyline, we're kind of they saw Tanan Jungle at the beginning of their experience, and they're kind of wrapping back around to it. Anything can happen between now and whatever we do next. But yeah, I mean, I think we see it as that kind of pinnacle of where players are getting to.
And so for the future, do you plan to have like 2 red patches per expansion, like general line?
It's a good question. We've kind of gone back and forth. Sometimes we've had 4 patches in a cycle. Sometimes we've had 3. Obviously here we're looking at 2 big patches with 6.1 and 6.2. And I think as you see us kind of hit that goal of the cycle getting shorter between expansions as a whole, I think an obvious impact of that would be that there would be less large patches because there's less time, right, between that cycle. And for us to build a big patch takes a lot of time to be able to do. So I think as you see that shrink, you would see the number of patches shrink along with it. But I can't tell you an exact number. It's always kind of a feel, right? It's like, do we need a patch right now? Does it feel like we need a patch in the next few months that's going to give players something that they want to carry them, because we know that the raid is going to take a little bit longer than we expect, right? But we can't let them go that long, so we need something in the middle, right? So sometimes we have to, we'll come up with something that feels good for a patch. We generally try to have a plan for the story all the way through about, what's going to be at this patch, what's going to be at that. But, just like our community, the game is always changing, right? It's always different. We're going to get feedback. We're going to play it ourselves, feel like something needs to be different. So we just have to keep up with the pulse, right? And we've got to react.
Okay, great.
Okay, we talked about flying in Draenor. I think like 2 months ago, you said that it wasn't on your plan. Why did your idea change about this subject? What did bring you the idea to bring back flying in Draenor with such an achievement?
I think that we felt like we came to a compromise that worked for both us, for the game design of the game, for it to still feel the way that we wanted it to feel and fun, and for the content to be played the way it was intended, but also for a way to deliver flying to the community, which obviously was it was the most loud thing we had heard from our community in a very long time, right? It's pretty hard to ignore. And in the end, World of Warcraft isn't World of Warcraft without our players, without our community, right? It doesn't mean that we're always going to do everything the community wants, but it was pretty loud and clear, and there were a lot of very strong reasons why it felt like we had to bring flying back. People have flying mounts already. There's ways to get new flying mounts still. We built Draenor to support flying. I mean, obviously you can use Eviana's Feather and things like that. So it can support flying with a little bit of work, which is what we're going to do for the 6.2x patch. But I think none of the content was built to be experienced on a flying mount, right? It had all been built for players to experience on the ground, because we really feel like that's a core thing to making our content good. You've got to fight your way to the back of a POI. We don't want you to helicopter down, grab the chest and bail out. Occasionally it can feel fun to feel overpowered like that. And we're okay with that, but that generally should be after you've experienced all the content in the intended way. So we really like this concept because the achievement let us pick out a bunch of things that we thought players that are really a little bit more hardcore and really into the game will be able to get it a little bit quicker, right? They'll be able to do those things faster. But we also picked things that we felt like over time, everyone would be able to get all of the things on that achievement, and everyone would have access to flying. And so I think the accumulation of all this is that we felt like we came to a great compromise between where we feel comfortable with how players are experiencing the content and the community gets to have flying.
Okay, thank you.
About the about the legendary ring, we have a few questions about it, and I will start with the first one. Doesn't you feel that the legendary item is now less legendary than before? For example, the cosmetic effect of the ring isn't so epic as maybe was a weapon before. Remember with Thunder Fury, when someone was going through the capital with the weapon, everyone was staring at someone. And today it's not the same. Do you plan maybe to bring some more old school legendary items with such a great look and feeling?
So I think just because we're doing this new type of legendary that every player can have access to, doesn't mean that we won't ever go back to doing legendaries that are specific to classes. So this is something that was new in Pandaria, right? It was the first time we kind of introduced a concept like this. And the design pitch for it really came for the fact of, what if we did something that we updated every single patch through the whole cycle of the expansion, and at the end it rewarded kind of an incredible reward. We didn't know what the reward was at that point in time, actually. We just knew we wanted to create a kind of an epic quest line that went all the way through the expansion, right? And we came to the concept of doing the legendary cloak at the end of that. And obviously we knew that earlier than at the end, but the idea was that if we were going to give it to everyone, it had to be something that everyone earned by playing every single patch, right? And so we liked that concept, and that's why we moved forward with that into Warlords of Draenor, like you see with the ring here. The idea that every patch, the quest continues, there's new things to do, and no matter who you are, everyone can have a chance, hopefully, to if they put in the time, everyone can have a chance to get that legendary. But I totally agree with you guys that a legendary like that doesn't have the same feeling that earning your individual class legendary, Fangs of the Father, things like that. Like it doesn't have that same vibe, and I think we know that, and so we'll continue to evolve on that. And the one that everyone can do, obviously, we want that to feel as epic and as awesome as it can humanly be, right? So that's great feedback. We'll take that in, and stuff that we hear from the community. We want those to feel epic for everyone. But I think there's also a certain thing about doing the individual class legendaries that feels great, feels unique. The problem with that, obviously, is that we have a lot of classes, so it's hard to make one of those, for every single class, every expansion or something, right? So we kind of have to pick and choose what feels right at what time. Does this one feel right for this thing? And so, yeah, it doesn't mean that those are going away forever. It just means that we're trying something different right now.
Okay. And about the legendary ring still, when you go to the red now, the legendary ring will have a big importance for high-level players, because it will affect every player with the legendary ring in the red. And when I raided, I used to take an alt for some bosses because it was more convenient with the composition. Yep. Will it be a problem? Do you think the ring will be a problem if my alt doesn't have it, and if I maybe don't have time to farm it on 2 characters for my red? Have you ever considered making the ring a bounded account, for example?
We have
quest line.
That's not something we've really thought about necessarily, because the idea there is that the journey is on that character, right? You're doing everything on that character. The answer to your question, though, is that the raids aren't tuned specifically thinking that everyone in the raid will have the legendary ring. What we do is we look at the amount of time, because we know internally what are different types of players, what the average amount of time it is that it will take them to earn the legendary ring, right? And so we look at when the raid comes out, when that raid is available, on average, how many people do we think will have the legendary ring? And then we'll kind of try to tune as close as we can to that point. That doesn't mean that we're going to tune on every single person, because some people just don't really care about the legendary ring, so they're they're never going to do it, right? But they might still love raiding. They just might not, maybe they're not into doing single player quest content, maybe they're not into doing whatever that was. So I don't think we can assume that everyone will have that item. But that's also the great thing about our hotfix system, is that we can continually look at all of our raid fights and dynamically fix anything very quickly. So if something's out of tune, doesn't feel right, I'm sure you guys know Ian, that team is always looking at feedback, constantly looking at numbers that we get internally about how the fights are going, what are the success rates on the fights, how long are the fights taking, and we tune. And we try to tune to make sure that everything feels as balanced as it can be, because the raid game, the high-end raid game in World of Warcraft is about that balance. If that balance is off, the fight's not going to be fun, right? And so we've really got to nail that. So it's something that we're constantly looking at.
Okay. At BlizzCon, you talked about Farallon zone that should have been introduced in Warlords of Draenor. Did you completely push it off, or do you have some hope to see it before the end of the expansion?
Farallon was something was a very cool idea, something we were really excited to deliver on. It turned out that Farallon didn't really fit into the story that we were telling the same way we expected the story to play out. So, as you guys probably know, things change over the course of an entire expansion. And there's a number of things that we talked about at that BlizzCon that ended up being different. I think at that BlizzCon, you could place your garrison, you could choose like whatever zone you wanted your garrison to go in. Another thing that we ended up realizing wasn't going to work with what we wanted to do. So things change. It doesn't mean Farallon isn't an awesome, cool place. The reason why we had it on the map originally is because we felt like there was a lot of cool story we could tell there, kind of a little bit of the history of Netherstorm. How did Netherstorm originally become to be? A lot of concept art and a lot of ideas on it. It just ended up not being something that played in to the expansion. Does that mean we'll never do it? Totally not. I think we're totally the kind of place that when we have a cool idea, we latch onto it and we like it. We will try to find ways to do those ideas later. There's lots of things that didn't make it into Burning Crusade, or there's things that didn't make it into Wrath of the Lich King that we try to, that we'll try to get in later down the line. Tol Barad didn't make it till Cataclysm, right? And Tol Barad was something we had been talking about for a long time. Actually, all through Lich King, we talked about Tol Barad and how that could maybe be something we could do. It just ended up not fitting the story, right? It didn't really feel like it was there. But for a Cataclysm, ended up fitting in perfect.
So we'll see that next expansion.
No promises on that.
Yeah.
So now about the WoW token that helps you and that you can buy at the auction house, and you can buy WoW time with gold. Are you satisfied with the impact of the token?
I think we're pretty happy overall with how the token has played out, to be honest. It really feels like it fits a niche for some of our players. We're looking for something like that. The transfer of in-game gold versus money, but doing that in a way where players feel safe, they feel comfortable about doing that. If a player puts in a ton of time into WoW and they're earning gold, and they want to be able to convert that into game time, I think it's a great way for them to be able to do that for those players, and vice versa. The opposite way, if a player doesn't have enough time to play the game as much as he wants, to have the amount of gold they want, they have the option to get gold, but to do it in a safe way, right? And I think that's really kind of the key of the whole system. Obviously, we knew that there were players doing that. There are gold farming operations and things like that. Those have been going on since WoW really started, right?
Yeah.
And part of this allows people to feel like a transaction like that is okay. We're okay with that, but we want it to be safe. We want it to feel reliable, and we want it to work, right? Like we watch the prices hyper aggressively on the auction house and everything to make sure that we know, where the price is fluctuating and how it's working. We have a lot of things set up on that. And I think we feel like it's pretty much where we thought it was going to be, which feels great, because you never really know how a system like that's going to work. Is the market going to get flooded early? Is someone going to figure out an exploit and do something? But overall, for such a large system like that to be implemented into WoW, I think we feel like it went pretty smooth, and we're pretty excited about it.
Okay, great. Coming back to patch 6.2 and Mythic Dungeons, some players feel this is only useful for alts. What is your opinion about it?
Actually, this is something we just talked about actually yesterday in our weekly design leads meeting. So we feel like there's a little bit of tuning we need to do on some of those dungeons, but overall, I think we're pretty happy with the challenge level that it offers people, right? It feels like it kind of fits that role where if you're going to get 5 people and go in, they're looking for a specific challenge, and that's what we're trying to offer. So I think we're pretty happy with that. You'll continue to see us do tuning and things like that. But I don't think we see it just specifically as something that should be only alt-friendly, right? We want it to be something where you could go there, and if you have a chance to get, currently, I don't think you guys have seen we have a fix in progress to allow items to be Warforged to higher levels for Mythic Dungeons. So currently, I think you could only get, I believe it was 1 level of Warforged. We're going to allow items to be Warforged another level up.
Okay.
That chance could happen. And I think that will really help a lot with the concept where they feel like, I'm bringing my character here, I might raid with this same character, but this content doesn't feel like it has anything for me. So that chance to have higher Warforged items would get people to really hit that content a little bit more.
Okay. And this patch also was the release of Time Walker.
Oh yeah.
So you can visit all dungeon with a good level of difficulty. Do you plan to bring the idea back to raids, or for example turn old raids into dungeon, Time Walker dungeon?
Raids isn't something we really talked about a ton yet with Time Walking, because Time Walking scales players down, right? As you guys know, like it scales you down to that level to run that content. Is it something that could happen in the future? Totally. But we're starting with 5-player dungeons and going to make sure that we get that right. So I think what people have seen in the content that's out there now is I think they've seen kind of varying levels of difficulty and tuning. Some feel real easy, some feel super hard. And that's just something on us, which we'll be fixing over the course of hotfixing. We'll try to balance out a little bit of the difficulty a little bit better there. And then also we want to make sure the reward feels right. So for Time Walking, currently, I believe you get a token. I think you get a raid roll token if you do the quest to do the 5. That's something we're talking about possibly giving players maybe like a normal mode cache, possibly instead. So they'll have a chance if they do the 5 dungeons for the quest, not only would they get the token, they could maybe get the cache as well. So you'd have a chance at a really great item, along with the fact that obviously it's great for gearing up alts. But just like we talked about with Mythic Dungeons, we don't want the content to feel like, unless I have an alt, that stuff's useless for me. We want people to feel like all the content is something that could give you something for your character, right? And so this is just stuff like, the patch has only been out for a little bit of time here, but as we get feedback, we feel like we have to adjust rewards, we've got to adjust difficulty, we've got to adjust everything to make sure that it feels right.
About the lore of Worlds of Draenor, you announced from the beginning that Grommash was the end boss of this expansion. What did you make change your mind during the flow of the expansion?
I think when we got to that changed when we were designing the raid, the Hellfire that you guys are seeing now in the patch. I think we felt like we wanted to do something that just felt a little bit more like it encompassed more of the story outside of just Draenor. So obviously we had positioned Grommash as that villain, right? And so he plays a big role in everything. But I think that concept of pulling Archimonde into it, using the Dark Portal, kind of changing some of this stuff around, I think really feels like it just makes everything feel like a grander scale when you get to that end kind of area, right? And so that's just a decision that we made that we felt like it would feel stronger. It doesn't mean that Grommash is any less of a character or that he doesn't play as much of an important role. I think if anything, it should let you know that the story of what's happening here in this expansion are big things, and there are things that could continue to affect the story in the future, right? So I think that's part of the deal here, right? It's just making sure that we end on a very, very epic note.
Yes, and I think we both really liked Gul'dan, and we are sad to see him going away.
Oh, he's a great character, right?
He was a great villain.
And will we have the chance to see him in next future?
I can't tell you specifically yes or no, but there's definitely a chance that you can see Gul'dan in the future. I think we invested time in Gul'dan because we feel like he's a great character too. He's a character that has a ton of potential. He has a lot of history in the Warcraft universe as a whole. A lot of us had a lot of fun working with him, so we would love to do more things with Gul'dan in the future for sure.
Okay.
We'll have to wait and see though.
Okay.
So thank you very much, Corey, for answering our question.
Oh, no problem.
It's really a pleasure.
Yeah,
and,
thank you.
Hope to see you soon again.
Yeah, you guys too. It was really fun. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.